Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Um, with all of your blessings, hopefully something beneficial can be said. I'll just start by offering our obeisances to our spiritual master and all of you. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Pancha kalpa trubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Put my phone on silent to set a good example. So today's class we'll be continuing Transcendental Diaries, the journal of Hari Sori Prabhu, in his service of being the personal servant to Srila Prabhupada. And we're at an interesting point in the book now where it's the end of volume 1 and the start of volume 2. And basically, right now they're preparing to leave India. The whole of volume 1 was all in India. And this is where we're starting today is the 18th of April 1976, and this is the day they are leaving India. So they're in Bombay and they're about to leave. So I'll just read. Prabhupada took his massage at 5 a.m., after which he bathed. I had been rushing about since 3:30 a.m., preparing for the trip. First, I packed Prabhupada's suitcase, then my own. After that, I massaged Srila Prabhupada, and while he bathed, I put away his dirty cloth, set out a clean set, and then changed into my clean clothes. After I packed the massage paraphernalia, I set up his tilak in his room. As he sat at his desk to apply it, I rushed to pack his bathing gear. And after he had finished his tilak, I hurried back to complete the packing of his desk items. So this is quite a thing for the personal servant, especially on a traveling day. So, as Prabhupada is finished using the items, he has to go and pack all of the items. So it's quite a thing. I think packing in general for any trip is quite a thing, but you packing not only for yourself, but for another person, and especially a person like Prabhupada who has a very fixed schedule, who he goes through a certain routine of doing things, and then as soon as he's done those things, you have to pack. It's quite a thing. When I came to his room at 7 a.m. with everything packed and ready to go, he was ready to leave and noted that I was also. But he didn't budge. Instead, he looked at me, tipped his head up slightly and said, "So, you have something?" I could not think what he was alluding to. Perhaps I had forgotten something. With a slight upward gesture of his eyebrows, he indicated my vest pocket, and it suddenly dawned on me what he was referring to. Last night, at the end of the evening darshan, I had picked up a 10-rupee note that one of his guests had placed at the foot of his asan. Usually, Prabhupada immediately puts such dakshina in his desk drawer or his red bag, and later it is deposited in some account, such as the Mayapur Vrindavan Trust. This time, however, I had slipped it into my pocket, thinking to give it to him later, but I had forgotten about it. I took it out of my pocket, and he called Giriraj in, handed over the note, and told him to deposit it. That matter settled, he then headed out the door. Prabhupada does not overlook the slightest detail. he is always very, very careful to see that whatever anyone gives him is used in Krishna's service and not wasted. He is exact down to the last rupee. Being such a conscientious manager, I can understand why he becomes upset at wasteful and careless disciples for whom, in the Western countries, money is so easily available. So this is quite an instructive pastime. Firstly, we're seeing that Prabhupada is even remembering this from the last, that it was in his vest pocket too. So Hari Sauri Prabhu had picked up a 10 rupee note from a guest. Now obviously 10 rupees back then, it's not a lot now, and it wasn't a lot back then either. But Prabhupada was very conscious about depositing these things in the trust and using it for Krishna's service. So Prabhupada remembered this when Hari Sauri Prabhu had forgotten it, and then he made sure that it was deposited. He was very conscious about all these small details and not wasting Krishna's energy. And there's some previous pastimes as well, which I think are in this book or also in Srila Kirti Prabhu's book, where, for example, in Mayapur, Prabhupada was walking past a room, and he saw that the door was locked, no one was in there, but the fan was left on. And then he said, demons. Now obviously these are all his disciples staying there, but he's referring to them as demons because they wasting Krishna's energy. They left the fan on and left the room. Or even if someone leaves the lights on and when it's not in use. Or one time Prabhupada was on a morning walk with the disciples, and then they see him just strolling off into someone's yard, which was a bit weird, especially in the West. And he goes into someone's yard, and there's a tap outside their house, and it's leaking slightly, and he just goes and closes it tight. So we can see that Prabhupada is very, very conscious of all these details, and that's something for us to develop as well, that obviously here, these things are in abundance. No one, even with load shedding, we don't really think of electricity as a scarce resource. It's just something you can just put the light on anytime you want, put any device on at any time. It's not, you don't even think about it. But actually being really Krishna conscious means not only chanting our rounds, following principles and, learning the Shastra and stuff, but also applying that and understanding that everything around us is Krishna's energy and should be used in his service and shouldn't be wasted. So, Prabhupada was always very conscious of this, and we can see that vision of the pure devotee. Sometimes we think the pure devotee must be just seeing Krishna everywhere, like seeing a little blue boy running around everywhere. And undoubtedly they can see Krishna. But also it's about seeing Krishna in the world around us, seeing that this microphone has come, ultimately it's come from Krishna. So it needs to be used in Krishna's service. And that's the same thing with everything that we see around us. It's all has its purpose, its ultimate purpose that can be fulfilled in Krishna's service. So, and Hari Sauri Prabhu mentions that being such a conscientious manager, he can understand why Prabhupada becomes upset at the disciples. So obviously us managers are not at that level yet where we can see all these fine details and make sure that all the things are off, all the things are like that. So then Prabhupada used to become upset with them. So it's something for us to learn from. Then it's continuing as they get to the airport. Um, as soon as we were airborne, Prabhupada had his breakfast. I set out each of the 4 circular stainless steel containers and filled them with whatever Prabhupada indicated from his well-packed tiffin box. From the multi-tiered container, he ate sabjis, puris, rice, some fried savories, vada and samosa, as well as some fruit and sandesh. I served him very carefully, much to the interest of the other passengers. That beats the meals on the planes any day, huh? As he does wherever and whenever he travels, Srila Prabhupada maintained his regular eating schedule. Knowing this, I was well equipped for the journey, and I am by now well versed in all the items that Prabhupada requires when traveling. On planes, he never accepts anything provided by the airlines because they handle meat. He doesn't even use the utensils like knives, forks, and spoons because generally the metal ones have already been used. He will use new plastic ones though. He won't eat anything touched by karmis. He will not even accept the salt that they provide. So in addition to the prasadam, I carried small packets of salt, pepper, and ginger. Generally he eats alone, but on the plane this was not possible. Unperturbed by his surroundings and the curiosity of the passengers, he simply continued following his daily schedule. He ate very slowly and carefully. By watching him take prasadam, it was easy to understand that the Lord's mercy, prasadam, is to be rendered service by the devotee. Prasadam should be eaten as humbly as one performs other forms of devotional service. Completely free from lust and other mundane attributes, His Divine Grace's devotion is apparent even in the most basic activity of eating. So this is another quite instructive pastime. We see Prabhupada quite strict with his diet, and even the salt he didn't accept from them. And it's time, place, and circumstance, I guess, because they can bring their own salt, so why should he use, outside ones? Of course, we know that when he first came to America, he was storing his boga along in the fridge where, there was cat food and stuff in there and stuff. So you have to do what's practical, especially when, he didn't have any facility available. But now that he had that ability, it's like, why should I accept anything, by people who are handling meat and stuff? Even he can just have his own utensils, his own prasadam. So, and then he was eating alone. Generally, Prabhupada used to eat alone. And he ate very humbly. I really liked the way Hari Sori Prabhu said, prasadam should be eaten as humbly as one performs other forms of devotional service. So this is something specifically for me to learn. And maybe some of you can identify as well. Generally, when it's prasadam time, when it's the time for the feast, that's all you think. We're fully in the enjoying mode now. We're in the enjoying spirit. We like already anticipating the feast that's going to come and the enjoyment that's going to come. But Prabhupada used to eat very humbly, or to be more correct, honor prasadam. And prasadam should be eaten as humbly as one performs other forms of devotional service. So, obviously, anytime you ask to give class or you ask to do any service, you automatically confronted with your weaknesses, and you automatically try to be as humble as possible, even though that humility might not be real humility. At least we practice, try to practice humility. And that's the same thing with most service. And, obviously when you're doing something like sweeping the temple, it's easy because you understand, my Lord, I'm just your menial servant, I'm placing myself in a humble position. And, we bow down. We do so many things in order to develop humility, in order to practice humility so that eventually we can actually develop some real humility someday. And the same thing goes even for prasadam. Even when we're eating, we should be eating humbly, which, might not be the case. Sometimes it's like, hey, I got all my friends around. It's like, it's time to eat and be merry, But actually, the way Prabhupada used to honor prasadam, Srila Kirti Prabhu describes that most of the time Prabhupada would look at the wall. He'd just be facing the wall, and I think you've seen this picture. He's got his one knee up, and then he's just calmly eating all alone and just respecting the prasadam, really savoring it also, and honoring the fact that this prasadam is non-different from Krishna, actually. So in the same way that how we'd be respectful before the deity of the Lord, we could actually have that same respect towards prasadam because they're non-different, actually. Of course, Prabhupada used to still accept invitations from, life members would invite him over, and he'd be a gracious guest, and he'd eat with the family and talk. And so it's not like talking while eating prasadam is not allowed or anything. But, he was there, he was doing the service of reciprocating with these, with his hosts. Generally, he would be really almost meditative when having prasadam. Because it's non-different from Krishna. And so I was wondering, how can we develop this humble mood, when it's so easy to just eat and joke and have fun. And we can also just be grateful, that I think that's a stepping stone to really the way Prabhupada honors prasadam, is just be grateful, understand that, I'm so grateful for the cooks who've cooked this preparation. I'm so grateful that they've offered it to Krishna, that I'm getting this opportunity to have the remnants of the Lord. It's a very rare thing. Of course, we know that pastime where Narad Muni really wanted the prasadam, the remnants of the Lord. But Vishnu, Narayan, does not give that. So anyway, Narad Muni really worshipped Lakshmi Devi so nicely, and Lakshmi Devi asked him, okay, you've done so much of service, please tell me, what can I do to reciprocate? What boon would you like? And Narad Muni said, I really want the prasadam, the remnants of the Lord. And then Lakshmi said, that I cannot give. Even I don't get that. That's very hard to get. But then, Lakshmi Devi with Narayan, she's a little bit morose now. And Narayan, obviously the Lord, can detect these things. I think husbands can generally detect these things with their wives. I'm not sure. But Narayan's asking her, so why? I can see that you're not yourself today. What's the matter? And then Lakshmi Devi said, Narad, your dear devotee, wants your remnants. Can you please arrange some for him? And then Narayan said, I don't give this to anyone, but it's okay. If you take it when I'm not looking, then it's fine. I won't know about it. So then Lakshmi Devi took the remnants, gave it to Narad Muni. Narad Muni had the remnants, and he's always ecstatic, but he's even more ecstatic after having this. And then he got so ecstatic, he went to see Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva can understand. My brother Narad, he is more ecstatic than usual. He inquired, what's happened here? And And then Narad said, I just had the remnants of the Lord. Then Lord Shiva got angry and he said, and you didn't give any for me? And then Narad Muni said, oh, okay, he in all this ecstasy, he didn't wash his hands properly, so there's still a bit under his fingernail. And he gave some to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva had that and got ecstatic, so ecstatic that he was dancing. And then, all the clouds of destruction were gathering because it's timed for destruction now. Lord Shiva is dancing. And then they're like, oh my God, no, this is not according to the schedule. Then Parvati could see, because she cannot see, Lord Shiva is not, this is more ecstatic than he's ever usually. And then she inquired from him about his ecstasy. And then Lord Shiva said, I just had the remnants of the Lord. And then Parvati said, you didn't give me. And then so she got very, very upset. And, it's one thing to anger Lord Shiva. To anger Parvati is even more destructive. But then that's how we got this blessing of Jagannath Mahaprasad, that the Lord told Parvati that, okay, from now on my prasadam will be available in this world. And that's why the Jagannath Mahaprasad is made available. And it first goes to Bimala Devi, who's form of Parvati. And because first the prasadam must go to her, to make up for this offense of neglecting her. So we can see prasadam is not an ordinary thing. If all these great personalities were so, we're so much looking forward to this, and we take it as a normal thing. Just now we're going to have breakfast. It's very normal for us. Every day we're having prasadam. It's like, it's one of the things that just happens. But it's not at all normal, and we can definitely be very grateful every time we honor prasadam. And I think by having that gratitude, eventually we'll reach the level that Prabhupada had, where he was really, really humbly eating prasadam. Went off on a bit of a tangent there, but when he finished his meal, Prabhupada told me to call Pushta Krishna Maharaj. Together we shared whatever was left over. I always feel a little uncomfortable eating in Prabhupada's presence, thinking that it may offend him. But he always insists that his servants take prasadam whenever he does, and he is concerned to see we are taken care of. Some of the passengers saw us eating the remnants of Prabhupada's half-chewed puris, and I think they were a little shocked. But of course, in Prabhupada's association, we were unaffected by their mundane opinions. At the end of his meal, Prabhupada very carefully cleaned his mouth with a toothpick, then poured a little water on his hand to cleanse it before drinking from the cup. He first swilled his mouth out and then drank, and thereafter he completed his ablutions in the bathroom. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. By the time he returned, I had cleared everything away. Srila Prabhupada spent the rest of the time before our arrival in Colombo silently chanting japa. So, we can see that Prabhupada insisted that his servants take prasadam whenever he does, and he was always concerned about taking care of them. Which is, very sweet exchanges he used to have with this, especially with the personal servants. Just some background on this flight info. So the flight was from Bombay to Colombo, Sri Lanka, then to Singapore, then to Sydney, then to Melbourne. So it's quite a flight. So then they arrived in Colombo, and because they were traveling in first class actually, So they got access to the first class lounge, although they had a whole struggle to go through immigration to get there. But then they thought, first class lounge access, so they, Prabhupada can actually rest there. Then when they go there, they find out it's actually a bar. So, and it was closed when they first arrived, so they went and, Prabhupada had a bit of a nap, but then, the bar opened and it soon became full with people who were noisy and drinking and smoking. And so then Prabhupada chose to sit on the uncomfortable plastic seats outside. The plane was due to begin boarding at 8:15 for a 10 p.m. departure to Australia, but some mechanism on the plane required attention and we boarded an hour late. There were further delays and we had to sit on the aircraft for another 3 hours. To keep everybody happy, the crew handed out free drinks to the passengers. Consequently, everyone became noisy and boisterous. Prabhupada sat patiently through the ordeal without complaining. It was not until 12:30 a.m. that the Qantas flight took off. Quite an ordeal. This whole episode of travel, actually, at every stage, is quite an ordeal of things to go through. But I think what's important to note is Prabhupada's response and reaction to all of this. He's just calmly going through everything. I think the personal servants and stuff are like, losing their wits sometimes, but Prabhupada is just kind of calm and tolerating everything. Flying in the first class section offered more sitting room, but little facility for lying down. So after a short while in the air, Prabhupada went back into the economy section and lay across an empty row of seats until about 3:30 a.m. So obviously first class in those days was not how it is now. I've never been in first class, but you see they do the whole reclining thing and stuff now. It wasn't there then. So Prabhupada went back into the economy section and laid across an empty row of seats. Our seats were directly in front of the movie screen, and when Prabhupada returned, there was a war movie playing. Without headphones, we both watched as the hero, David Niven, ran up a mountainside, got shot, then blown up, and then again began fighting in hand-to-hand combat. Prabhupada looked for a couple of minutes and then turned to me with mock surprise. "Still alive?" he said, and laughed. With the sound turned off, the movie looked like what it was, a silly make-believe, the epitome of the material world. Prabhupada turned away and chanted japa. Although he tolerated everything without complaint, the unbroken 7-hour flight to Australia, plus the long delay in Singapore, was very difficult for him. He mentioned that any trip longer than 3 to 4 hours is a strain. Nevertheless, for preaching, he is prepared to accept any difficulty. His own personal comfort is his last consideration. So this is quite a thing to learn from. Generally, I think our personal comfort is quite high on our priority list. But here we can see for Prabhupada, his personal comfort is his last consideration. He's prepared to do anything for preaching. It was an interesting thing watching the movie with the sound off. They didn't connect their headphones in. And then you can just see, this is so silly. When the sound is off, it's like, what is going on here, And the same thing applies to the material world, Maybe if we block our ears or we don't get invested and we just see the things that are going on around us, it's all quite silly, really. There's just a bunch of people scurrying about, doing things, eventually just to end up dying, and without having spent any time in life understanding what life is about. That whole concept is quite silly. But we all get very deeply invested in these things, and we need these constant reminders about what life is really about. But if we take like a step back and look at things around us, we can see actually there's more to life than what we see going on around us. And so this is how Volume 1 ends. And Volume 2 begins. And I'll just mention a little bit of the introduction to Volume 2, just to set us up for, well, I guess all the classes that will still be to come. So Harisori Prabhu writes, this volume of a Transcendental Diary traces the pastimes of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, during the first half of his last world tour. I had originally planned to present the entire tour in one volume, from Srila Prabhupada's arrival in Melbourne on April 19, 1976, to his departure from Tehran on August 13, 1976. But the amount of material available was so great, it became clear that to make a presentation with the same kind of detail found in Volume 1, I would have to split the material into two parts. The reason for this is easy to fathom. The number of recorded conversations and lectures for 1976 surpasses any other year of Srila Prabhupada's preaching. Prabhupada's servants acquired a cassette recorder in early June, making it quick and convenient to record His Divine Grace's spoken words, and we were increasingly attentive to the task. Still, the material presented here represents only a fraction of the total. It is not possible to present everything in a book of this nature, nor is it necessary. So in this volume, we will glimpse the international scale of Srila Prabhupada's traveling and preaching as he visits Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Hawaii, mainland America, and Canada. In many ways, he was concerned with consolidating the gains of the explosive expansion of ISKCON in the early 1970s. He purposefully chose to visit major new acquisitions of property in Detroit and Toronto, and Washington, D.C. and New York, as we will see in Volume 3. Yet at the same time, he continued to relentlessly push himself and his disciples to increase the influence of the Krishna conscious movement on broader and broader scales. While traveling, he remained intimately involved through the mail with every detail of the development of his society in India, and he advised and encouraged his disciples to penetrate the Iron Curtain of communist Eastern Europe and China. So it's really quite a large-scale volume. Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Hawaii, America, Canada, and all the time still talking to his disciples in India, and even asking the disciples to penetrate communist Eastern Europe and China. Really quite a tour that Volume 2 is covering. So this was all on the 18th of April 1976. Now we're on the 19th of April 1976. You can see a day in the life of Srila Prabhupada is quite action-packed. It takes a while just to talk about the things that he was living. Before landing, we filled out the customary landing cards, which also required a list of baggage. Without thinking carefully, we filled out Prabhupada's card, indicating that he had one suitcase. Once off the plane, we passed through immigration without difficulty and entered the baggage hall. We decided that Srila Prabhupada and I should go directly through customs, carrying only his red attaché case, and Pushta Krishna Swami would bring the suitcases. However, the customs officer insisted that Prabhupada wait for the suitcase indicated on his form. I pleaded strongly with the man to please allow Srila Prabhupada to go through immediately. I assured him that I would wait and take full responsibility for the suitcase. I pointed out that there were no chairs for Prabhupada to sit down on, and it would take at least a half an hour more for the bags to come off the plane. Prabhupada was over 80 years old, had been traveling for so many hours, and it was unnecessary to make him wait, and I had packed his bag for him anyway. Despite my best attempts, the customs official was utterly uncooperative and refused to allow Srila Prabhupada to go through. The discussion became heated as my temper rose. A small crowd of passengers gathered around us to see what the disturbance was. Srila Prabhupada just walked away and stood quietly to the side. The official was obdurate. He returned to his post, leaving me standing there fuming. So, I think we're aware that these customs officials and all are very strict. And they didn't allow Prabhupada to go through, even though he's an 80-year-old man. His suitcase was packed by Hari Sori Prabhu anyway, but they wanted Prabhupada to wait for the suitcase indicated on his form. This is another one of those silly things that we see in the world where there's a bunch of people who prevent others from entering their country. Obviously, we understand that everything belongs to Krishna. So we can't even claim the land as our own. You know, like a bunch of us here have just kind of grouped together. We call ourselves South Africans. South Africa, the country, belongs to us, and we're going to prevent everyone else from coming here. And that whole concept just doesn't make any sense. You know, how can anyone deny access to anyone else if we understand that this person is part and parcel of Krishna, I'm part and parcel of Krishna? How can I claim any more right to a certain tract of land than anyone else? But anyway, Prabhupada just walked quietly and he stood at the side. 2 minutes later, an airport policeman approached me to ask what was going on. I explained that we simply wanted Prabhupada to be allowed to go straight through to customs without his bag. He asked, "Is all that going on because of him?" That was the loud roar of a tremendous Harinam Kirtan coming through the doors leading into the arrival hall. The Kirtan could be clearly heard above all the airport noise and public address announcements. Guru Kripa Swami and a large number of devotees were excitedly banging kartals, beating mridangas, and chanting so loudly that airport officials had moved them away from the main greeting area. But still the sound drowned out everything else. With every opening and closing of the doors, the intense chanting boomed louder and then receded. I can just imagine, I can just picture it, you know. So in the arrival hall, there's a huge group of devotees like going crazy. And then on the baggage side, you know, the devotees are there wondering what's going on outside. And then as the doors are opening and closing, the noise is coming in. It's like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And then the doors close. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. You know, so it must just, the police and stuff would have just all been wondering, you know, what is going on here? The sounds of the holy name uplifted us, and when Prabhupada heard it, he inquired innocently, "This is our men?" The airport security personnel were somewhat bewildered as to how to handle the situation. "Will they stop if he goes through?" the policeman asked. I assured him, yes, they will. And within seconds, Prabhupada was allowed to pass through, leaving Pushta Krishna and myself to wait for the bags. So you can see, the customs, you know, will definitely not, you cannot go through until you get your one bag on your form. But then this kirtan going on just forced them to allow Prabhupada through because they just wanted to stop. You know, they don't know how to handle this big, massive kirtan happening. So you can see kirtan solves all the problems, even customs problems. As Prabhupada disappeared through the door and was spotted by the devotees, the kirtan reached a terrific crescendo with loud shouts of Jai Prabhupada. The noise stopped abruptly and Prabhupada was taken into the VIP lounge where devotees had arranged a press conference. While Prabhupada conversed amiably with a host of news reporters, I experienced another dramatic episode. As I brought Prabhupada's suitcase to the customs check, the officer, a different one this time, not wanting another scene, smiled and said that it would take but a moment. Could you just open the case? He asked. I obliged, and he gave a cursory squint under the lid. He was just about to close it when a huge 2-inch cockroach leaped out. It must have taken shelter inside Prabhupada's winter coat in Bombay and obviously decided that Australia was a better home. But this was not to be. The customs officer reacted instantly. Quarantine, quarantine, he shouted and hit a big red button. My heart froze as a loud buzzer went off and a big red light began flashing. Someone rushed over with 2 large cans of bug spray, and I had visions of being stuck there for hours. But the man simply smiled reassuringly. It was all under control. Whap! The poor bug was summarily executed on the desktop. The contents of the 2 cans were emptied into the case, and the lid slammed shut. It took hardly a minute, and then I was on my way at last, the customs official offering me a smile and best wishes for my stay in Australia. Shame, huh? About the cockroach. But anyway, that cockroach had physical association with Prabhupada. That's more than I've had. So, meanwhile, Prabhupada was winning over the reporters with his friendliness and sincerity. Even though he had been traveling for almost 22 hours, Prabhupada was happy to honor the arrangements made by the enthusiastic devotees for the interview. At the end of the conference, he gave a reporter his flower garland, distributed prasadam to the others, and then left by car for the temple. So, you can see it's just a non-stop for both Harisori Prabhu and Srila Prabhupada and Pushta Krishna Swami. It's just this very, very eventful trip. Upon arrival, although it was 2:30 p.m., Prabhupada went straight into the temple room and had a special darshan of the deities. Sri Sri Gaurnitai, Sri Sri Radha Vallabha, and Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra. He then gave a 10-minute lecture to the packed devotee audience. So even though he was tired and it was late and it was not even the darshan time of the deities, he had a quick darshan and had a quick 10-minute class where he mentioned, amongst other things, I'll not speak very much now, but this much I must express. My obligation that you are worshipping the deity so nicely. That is my great happiness, and that is your happiness also. The more gloriously you worship the deity, decorate the deity as gorgeously as possible, the more gorgeous you will be. That is the secret. The materialistic, they are trying to dress themselves very gorgeously, and gradually their dress is being taken away by Maya, and voluntarily they are becoming hippies. Because they did not try to dress Krishna, therefore Maya is taking their dresses. So the secret of success is that everything belongs to Krishna. Simply you have to collect them and offer for the pleasure of Krishna. So it's continuing this theme that everything around us that we see is actually meant for Krishna's pleasure and should be engaged as such. And I like the way Prabhupada mentioned that the materialistic people are trying to dress themselves and Maya is taking away that dress. And we can see that eventually all our fancy dresses will get taken away by old age, disease, and death. So, but those who are dressing Krishna, that they will have an eternal success. And the more gorgeous you will be. And then Prabhupada concluded by thinking of the 2 divine brothers. He had named this temple Melbourne Mahaprabhu Mandir because he had installed these deities of Gaurnitai. And he commented that Gaurnitai worship is so nice that they can be worshipped merely by performing kirtan. One time Bhakti Charuswami was also saying that to worship Gaurnitai, even if you don't feed them, as long as you do kirtan, they'll be happy. Because that's just their nature. So they can be worshipped very simply. So even though this age, obviously we know the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan, and the previous age, deity worship was the process, still deity worship is obviously still active and still beneficial, and we can see it's going on very nicely. But the deity worship of Gaur Nitai is so nice that you can perform the deity worship by kirtan. And actually, I forget who it was. I think Aindra Prabhu was mentioning that even our deity worship is not complete without the performance of kirtan. And so he was appreciating, I think, Jananivas Prabhu and Pankajangri Prabhu, that when they on the altar and doing the deity worship, after they finish, they come in and join the kirtan. Because our deity worship also is very important, that it's inclusive of kirtan, of Harinam. And then the final part, which is good because we just have a short time left. Oh yes, before continuing, is there any questions on this part so far? I should have probably stopped and just checked at a few, because we've covered a few different things going on. Is there any questions before we move on to the next part? Okay. So this is concluding 19th April now, 1976. After resting, Prabhupada came down into the temple at 7:30 p.m. The devotees have arranged to have a temple program each evening during his visit, so Prabhupada will speak at that time rather than in the morning. Tonight he delivered a dynamic lecture on Bhagavad Gita 9.1, elaborately explaining how to understand God as the Supreme Being. Nearly 100 devotees from all over Australia, plus some 20 guests, listened attentively and asked thoughtful questions at the end. One young Christian man had a lengthy exchange with Prabhupada. He first pointed out that in our Krishna conscious movement we say, I am not this body, but as a Christian he would say, this is my body and this is my blood. In other words, he felt there was something wrong with our apparent rejection of the body, because the body is in fact the self. Prabhupada took his statement and gave it a different interpretation. To say my body or my blood means the body or blood is not me. The blood belongs to me, so me is different. Despite Prabhupada's obvious logic, the boy's thinking was shrouded in dogma, and he had difficulty understanding the concept. The point is that it makes it one. It makes body and soul one if one says, this is my body and this is my blood. Prabhupada disagreed. No, it requires a little intelligence, just like you are breathing. So when the breathing is stopped, you say, the man is dead. But what is this breathing? This breathing is nothing but a little portion of air passing. So you can artificially make that arrangement, air passing. But does it mean that it will bring life? So therefore, breathing is not life. Life is different from breathing. You have to study scientifically. And this continued, and eventually the youth conceded, all right, I agree. Then you accept the soul is different from the body? Prabhupada inquired. Yes, I understand. But no sooner had he accepted than he launched into another faulty premise. So you call that Krishna. But God is God. God's name is God, not Krishna. You may call him Krishna if you want. Although the devotees were becoming a bit restless with the boy's questioning, Srila Prabhupada dealt with him patiently, challenging him to state the name of God if he knew it. As we expected, he couldn't. All he could reply was, God is God. So man is man, Prabhupada told him, but who is that man? You do not know. The point I am trying to make is that you call God Krishna. Christians call God by whatever name they called God. A few of the devotees were laughing, but Prabhupada patiently tried to lead him with simple logic. Suppose you have heard there is a president, but if you hear from somebody the president's name is this, so what is the harm? Prabhupada asked. You become advanced in knowledge. Suppose you go to a country. You know that that government has got a president, but if somebody says the president's name is this, then where is the wrong there? Nothing wrong, the boy admitted. Prabhupada challenged, then you do not know the name of God, but if I give you the name of God, what is the wrong there? And then he carried on, and then Prabhupada eventually said, that you say, what is that name? You say me. The point is that I would like to suggest, the man was speaking. No suggestion, Prabhupada told him. God's names cannot be suggested. Then he is not God. You cannot suggest God's name. The boy finally got out what he wanted to say, revealing a common misunderstanding. Well, then you make God into a person called Krishna. God is a person, Prabhupada told him. I have already said it. It is described in the dictionary, the supreme being. You are being, I am being, but he is the supreme being. You are not supreme, I am not supreme. It was getting late, and Prabhupada called a halt to the discussion. Signaling for kirtan to begin, he gracefully stepped down from his Vyasasan and walked across the connecting courtyard to his rooms in the mansion. Pleased with the turnout, Prabhupada became even happier when informed that there will be a big feast for the devotees and guests to enjoy after his lecture each evening. So we had the big evening feasts even back then. He took rest around 10:45 p.m., his stamina seemingly undiminished, and then rose after an hour or so to spend the rest of the night translating and commenting on Srimad Bhagavatam. Pushta Krishna and I are both exhausted and suffering from jet lag, but Prabhupada seems completely unaffected. He is amazing. So this is the conclusion of the next day now. So the first day was the last day in volume 1, and the next day was the one we just covered, the first day in volume 2, the first day in Australia. So all together, everything we discussed happened over 2 days, and it was quite eventful, as you can see. I mean, you can just go on speaking about this for more than 2 days, the activities that got spent in that 2-day period. And that's the nature of Srila Prabhupada's life and pastimes, that so many instructive pastimes took place that you can actually spend more than a lifetime just going through Prabhupada's lifetime here. And this particular just evening lecture, a lot of interesting points and a lot of thoughtful questions, although kind of challenging questions, but still Prabhupada appreciated these questions, and a lot of faulty premises that need to be extinguished in our minds. So one was that the boy was saying, no, the body and the self is the same. And then Prabhupada was, showed him quite obviously that when I say things like my body, then that me that's referring to is different. And then the boy was saying, so you can't call God Krishna. God's name is God. And then Prabhupada was telling him about the president. So this is another thing that happens sometimes, where people think we can't attribute a name to God. And then it becomes more obvious later when he's saying, because when we give a name to God, we're making him a person. So God is a person. That's why he has names. And then, and he's so merciful that he has many names, not just one. Of course, we know that a very primary name of God, if any name can be attributed, that name would be Krishna, because that includes all the other names of God. Krishna means all attractive, and therefore it includes all the other names of God. But Krishna is so merciful that he doesn't just have one name. So people can refer to him as Christ, Allah, Jehovah, according to their understanding and relationship with God. And the amazing thing about God's names is that they're non-different from himself. So to associate with God directly, one can simply chant his names and get that association. It's very different from us. If I say Ravindra Swarup, it's very different from getting a hug from him, because it's quite a different experience altogether when he picks you up and stuff. So, but if you want the association of Krishna, all you have to do is chant his name, and you get direct association with Krishna, even if you can't really understand or perceive it. That is the nature of Krishna. And then also, people have a complaint that calling God Krishna, but then they can't supply any alternative name. So that just doesn't make sense. If we ignorant of something, it doesn't mean that doesn't exist. Just because we don't know what the name of God is, doesn't mean God doesn't have a name. Just because we're ignorant of what God's form is, if we've read some scripture and there's no detailed description of God's form there, we cannot make that claim that God doesn't have a form. It just means that we don't know about it yet. So then when we presented with the Vedic understanding that God actually has a name, has many names, he has a form, actually has many forms as well, there's no reason to deny it unless we can give evidence to the contrary. But people have a hard time accepting these things. So that covers the 2 days. Are there any questions about any? I think lots of different things happened over these 2 days. We might have even forgotten what happened in the early parts by the time we reach this part. But are there any questions or comments, or anyone wanted to add anything, contribute? Yeah. Good to use the mic for the online viewers.
Haribol. First of all, on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for enlightening us with some of teachings coming from Transcendental Diaries.
Thank you.
I picked up 2 points which you mentioned earlier. First of all, my parents used to blast me. So they used to tell me straight in my face, like, don't you ever take prasadam as ordinary food. Just take it as Krishna's mercy. So they used to blast me in my face for that. And second point, you spoke about wasting Krishna's energy. So sometimes we, like during the day when it's bright, we put the lights, our room lights on and stuff like that. So sometimes we don't realize, it's one of Krishna's energy, and then we can't waste it and stuff like that. So that was a good point you made out there. So it really taught me something.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, this is things for all of us to consider, myself included. Automatically, a Krishna conscious person will also be environmentally conscious as well. It's not just this mystical thing like I'm saying some mantras and I'm becoming enlightened and like I'm reaching a new level of consciousness, and those things are also happening, but it's also in the everyday practical things that we see, like a tap open and we realize, oh wait, Krishna's energy is being wasted, I need to close this tap. Same thing with lights, fans, and all sorts of things that we see in our daily life. That's where we get to practice the Krishna conscious philosophy. Not only during japa time and, during artis and kirtans. So, is there anything else? Okay, thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Sauri Prabhu ki jai.